Let's talk about Firefox. For years now, it's been regarded as the everyday browser for people who care about their privacy. Even the Tor browser is based off of Firefox, and Firefox is still the most common browser that you see on Linux. And of course, many people end up switching to Linux. They end up taking that dip into the Linux pool because of privacy concerns that proprietary OSs like Windows and the Mac OS bring about. And the company behind Firefox, Mozilla, they've been a champion of privacy over the years. So what has happened? Why is the title of this video asking if Firefox is dead, besides just to get clicks? In a way, this has been happening for a long time. In the software world, you typically don't have projects that just die overnight. It's usually more of a slow, drawn-out, agonizing death. And if we rewind the clocks to around when Firefox version 2 came out in late October of 2006, there was really no debate at that point whether or not Firefox was the best browser. At that time, Chrome didn't even exist. Opera was pretty good. I mean, at that point, it wasn't a Chinese botnet, but it still wasn't as good as Firefox, and it still didn't have the same type of market share that Firefox had at that time. The only other browser that was being used more was, of course, Internet Explorer, because of the normie factor. I mean, we all know that it's the default browser on Windows, and obviously that's what most people are using, but for the people that were in the know, the only purpose that Internet Explorer served back then was for you to download Firefox with it. And I even remember around this time when I was playing RuneScape on a very low-spec laptop that I actually got better performance off of playing RuneScape in Firefox versus playing it in Jagex's downloadable web client that was made specifically for playing RuneScape. But then Google Chrome came out. And I don't really think that Google Chrome is actually a better browser than Firefox. I can do everything that I can do in Google Chrome with Firefox while using less CPU, less RAM, and less network data, since Firefox doesn't actively spy on me, at least not to the degree that Google Chrome does. But unfortunately, none of this is actually that relevant when it comes to dominating the market share. Because despite being bloated spyware, Google Chrome today owns about 2/3 of the desktop and mobile market share combined. Now, this is to be expected because Google Chrome is, of course, backed by Google, a much, much bigger company than Mozilla. Every time you go to google.com, which is still one of the most visited websites in the world, you get an advertisement for Google Chrome. Or if you sign into your Gmail, which is the most used email service in the world, you get an advertisement for Google Chrome. And of course, Google, they make hardware like the Chromebook and the Pixel phones. They make software like the Android operating system, which is probably the most commonly used mobile OS that there is. And on this hardware and software, Chrome is often the default browser. And if you're a default application, just like Internet Explorer back in the day, lots of people are going to use you. So Chrome is built for the normie, and thus it dominates the market share because most of the market share, most of the people using computers are normies. But Firefox, that's still our browser, right? It's built for us nerds who care about our privacy and who like to tinker with our technology and make sure that everything is as comfy and optimized as possible, right? Well, maybe in the past, but most of the moves that Firefox has been making in the past couple of years are just not ones that the majority of us nerds, us privacy advocates, or people who just want a great browser would appreciate. Like in 2017, Mozilla acquired Pocket, and they started building it into Firefox. So if you run a default Firefox binary with all of the default settings, you're going to get recommended BuzzFeed tier articles that are designed just to get ad clicks or to push a political agenda, or often both, every single time you open a new tab. This is the type of feature that's tailored to normies, not nerds. In 2020, Firefox decided to copy Brave by offering a VPN. Now, right off the bat, I don't think that a VPN being built into a browser is something that we, us nerds, would really appreciate, especially when it costs around the same price as a regular Mullvad VPN subscription, which is the infrastructure that actually hosts Firefox's VPNs anyway. And a lot of knowledge isn't really required to use a VPN in the first place. I think a lot of us more tech-savvy folks already have a VPN subscription. In fact, Mullvad is probably the one, if not one of the VPN subscriptions you have. And if you're using a VPN, it really should be Mullvad. So we have that. We already have a standalone VPN service which provides more features and more flexibility. We're able to use it for applications just outside of the browser. You might want to use it for torrenting or some other things like that. So again, building a VPN into your browser, that's another normie feature. And if we look at how Firefox makes their money over the past decade, about 90% of it has come from Google, because Firefox implements Google as their main search engine, which really just adds more work to people like us who are concerned about their privacy, because chances are, if you care about your privacy and if you also care about accurate search results, at least when it comes to anything that can even be vaguely politicized, you aren't going to use Google. Okay, you're going to use DuckDuckGo or some other kind of search engine which doesn't spy on you and doesn't manipulate search results. And I think that this move alone goes directly against Mozilla's values, since they claim to care so much about privacy, but yet they push Google, or at least the Google search engine, on its users, and they're obviously dependent on Google for this money. Worse still is the default telemetry data collection, which is enabled in Firefox by default. And you don't even have a user prompt or anything like that, which is telling you that this is on or letting you opt into it, which really should be the option. This shouldn't be a default thing. If you want to give Mozilla your telemetry data, that should be something that you opt into. So the only way you're going to know this is on is if you actually go into the settings and then you see it and then you disable it on your own. Default Firefox literally collects more data than the crypto shill Brave browser, at least with default settings. And Firefox is even thinking of adopting a crypto rewards model that is similar to what Brave has. So it seems like the future of Firefox is that it's just going to become a Brave Fox. It's just going to become some sort of a Brave ripoff, which in a way I think is good. I mean, maybe Firefox will eventually start being able to make money on things besides Gibbs from Google, but the reception to Brave has already been quite fractured, so I'm really not sure how well the community is going to receive Firefox if it's copying the business model of a browser which a lot of people already don't even like. Now, the most recent nail in the coffin for Firefox, as I'm sure you've probably heard, is their mass layoffs. Mozilla has laid off 250 of their employees, or about 1/4 of their workforce, and now they have this new business model of making money. Now, you would think that those layoffs would just be people who are working on nonsense projects like Firefox OS or Firefox VR, but no. Instead, they did things like kill off the entire threat management team, and they left the Firefox dev tools crew with a skeleton crew. So why is Firefox dying? Well, they lost the regular users to Chrome. They lost that many years ago, and they've been losing more and more as time goes on. Most people these days, they don't even know what Firefox is. And with the default settings, Firefox is actually slower, it's buggier, and it's actually a little bit less secure than a lot of the competition. And they continue to make it more of a pain to use by the privacy advocates like me, who are the ones that are actually supporting it today. I mean, not only do I have to add G-hacks and a couple of add-ons to make Firefox good, but now I also have to switch the default search engine. I have to disable Pocket and telemetry and Firefox's VPN, and soon I'm going to have to disable their crypto rewards program as well in order to make it truly private and secure. Now you might be thinking, Firefox is free and open source, and therefore it can be forked and we can just continue on with that fork, right? Well, I'm not really hopeful for that, because you see, Firefox is backed by Mozilla, and Mozilla is a company that makes hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and they spend a lot of that time and money and effort on maintaining Firefox. And if we look at the forks that currently exist, like Waterfox and Pale Moon, they don't really have a significant deviation of their code base from vanilla Firefox. They mostly just strip out a few things and that's it. So if Firefox dies, I'm sure that the forks will also perish. But I'm going to try and remain optimistic. I hope that Firefox can turn this around, that they can become more profitable, and that they can go back to having privacy as a default. And while they're at it, they should add LibreSSL support back in, because that hasn't worked for maybe the last 10 versions of Firefox. But cautious optimism is the best kind of optimism. So let me know in the comments down below, if Firefox does finally kick the bucket, what browser are you going to be switching to as a daily driver?